Welcome to Business Coaching Secrets with Karl Bryan. If you want to attract new high-end coaching clients, fill live events, and build a wildly profitable coaching practice where business owners pay, stay, and refer, you've come to the right place. In this podcast, Karl provides his keys to the kingdom for finding and signing high-paying clients and building the coaching business of your dreams. Here we go.
Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Business Coaching Secrets. It's your boy Road Dogg here with the man, the myth, the legend, the king himself, the king of Kettle Valley, Mr. Dr. Karl Bryan, the doctor of finance, Karl Bryan.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, wait, the doctor of crypto.
Absolutely.
You're the
Not
crypto,
yeah, there you go.
crypto doctor. There you go. Anything
Absolutely
goes.
not on any of those titles, but let's go with it. Road Dogg, how you doing, Shoots? What's happening?
I'm doing well, my friend. Maybe the cryptic doctor. That there you go. You see, I'm all about getting you some sort of a new nickname here, Shoots. This is how we're gonna roll this. So I'm doing good. How are you doing? How was the past week since we last spoke?
It's been good. Actually getting ready. Business coaching mastery is happening in Cancun next week. So I've been diligently knocking together a whole lot of content. So excited to do that. Looking forward to, haven't been on a plane out of, the country and I don't know how long. So looking forward to that. So that's what's happening here, bud.
Have you been getting your stretches and everything else in too to make sure that you're ready to start all your dancing and shenanigans, Congo lines, etc. as well?
You know it, bud. You know
I
it.
hate for you to pull up lame and injure.
The Congo line? You think you're like
I
a
can
doing
just
the Congo line? That'd be pretty.
Like you're rolling on the floor, hanging like just like a soccer player, like you got shot. Like that'll be you.
That might happen. Hey, we're doing a live stream, so there you go. Everybody will be able to watch. So
I'll have
there
to
you
go. Just give me the heads up. I just want to see the first lap. That's it. That's all I need to see. All right, but hey, listen. Last week we discussed. You briefly mentioned something about selling a business, right? So we got a little bit of feedback on that. A couple more questions rolling in here, and just in regards to buying a business. And somebody made a comment that, hey, I never thought about that before for my clients, and they were just curious, like, what are the primary keys to buying? And then I guess we could go into selling as well. A business. Did you want to touch on that and sort of close the loop on that for us?
Yep. So the keys to buying and selling a business, is that that's it in a nutshell?
They put buying and then in sort of brackets selling as well. So
that's
obviously,
good.
I'm not sure if those are the same things that you're looking for in either situation, but the floor is yours, sir.
All right. So I tell you, this is probably something, this is something that's misunderstood, or maybe it's not that it's misunderstood, it's just not understood in any way, and that we're not understanding the opportunity. If you go, there are, folks that will go and search, BizBuy, a bunch of places to go buy a business, just search it. And they will buy a business for, let's just say, out of pocket $1 million, which they will pay through a seller note or vendor financing, which means that they won't have to come up with you bought a house for $1 million. Don't think you got to write $1 million check. That is not the case. And they could parlay that into 10, 20, $25 million over the next 10 years. And those opportunities are sitting there, waiting for you. And so you said selling and buying, like buying is just the flip side of selling, right? So if you look at it, like on the other side, like, a debate, if you're a good debater, and someone's your coach, what they'll do is they'll give you a topic, get you to debate it on both sides. And when you can win on either side of the argument, you are ready and about to basically, take down your opponent in your debate, right? Like even you're looking for objections. What sort of objections would somebody have to buying your business? Will address those immediately. The same way when you go to sell coaching, before you walk in there to sell coaching, if you didn't think of what objections might this guy have or this gal have, you'd be silly, right? Like that's absolutely something you should do. So just the flip side, buying and selling is the exact same thing. You're just on the other side of the coin, right? I said, I think last week we covered like the danger zone. It takes 3 years to get the average company to $1 million, right, which is roughly $83,000 a month, and then it takes 5 years to crack the $2 million mark, right? So $1 million takes 3 years, takes 5 years to get to $2 million. So if you bought a $2 million business that is 5 years old, you just bunny hop danger zone big time. Or the way we positioned it last week and the way I'll position it here is that you just helped your client bunny hop the danger zone, right? So should you buy, should you start? Look, overarching principles here, like what do you want, right? Like you gotta, one or the other might be right for you or for your client. But let me tell you, when I ask you what you want, part of that probably, you're thinking about business, it's a really good chance that, at some stage you're going to want to retire. And mistake people make, and we've talked about this in the past, but it's super important in my opinion that people want to retire with net worth. Like, oh, I want to be worth, 1 million, 3 million, 5 million, 10 million, 25 million, and then retire, right? That is an inferior way of looking at it. What I would encourage you to be thinking is you want to retire with income. That's the guy or gal that is bulletproof in their, in their retirement, right? So in other words, like selling a business might be a bad idea. If you answered the question that way, selling the business, because if you sold the business, you now sold it, you've got net worth, you got money in the bank that you need to probably do something with. But how are you going to parlay that into income in the future? And if you choose poorly, that could go bad, right? Like the consultants talk about an exit strategy, right? Like that's kind of a lame way of looking at it. What you want to do is you want to help your client build a bulletproof business with sustainable and predictable profits. That's a business that's exitable. That's a business that if you put it up for sale, will actually have somebody stroke a check and come, take it off of your hands. And in a perfect world, you end up with a few people competing to buy your business. And this is when you get, a significantly higher buy price, right? So why do they sell? And by the way, why is somebody going to want to sell, right? Like they'd like to have income for the rest of their life. Basically, they get tired, right? There's so many businesses available right now. I'll tell you, there's 10 million businesses approximately, might be a little bit higher, a little bit lower, but I'm pretty close at 10 million baby boomer businesses out there operating right now. And my question for you is, do you think there's a decent percentage, there might be 1 to 5 to 10 that you could help your clients go, and basically maybe it's you, but you might be able to buy, right? But most people, and then they go to sell, right? And then the mistake people make is the problem that they have is that they go to sell their business. Let's say they get $1 million. Okay. So somebody's going to exit. They get $1 million. We hear about their exit for 7 figures. We think, oh my God, this guy crushed it. This guy, like, holy smokes. What you don't hear, it's very similar to, you have a professional athlete and they make $5 million a year. They do not end up with $5 million at the end of the year. They take home approximately 300 grand for every mil. By the time they pay taxes, pay trainers, pay everything, a little over that, let's say. But it's just, if you're making 5, you're bringing home a little bit over 1.5, let's say maybe 2 at the high end, right? But anyway, so, okay, a business sells for $1 million. They're going to have to pay taxes. They're going to have to pay the broker. There's going to be other folks they're going to have to pay. There's going to be unexpected expenses that are always going to creep up. So you're not left with $1 million, not even close. And then the question is, okay, well, was it a good idea, right? And then you calculate, so how would you establish that $1 million price, right? Like you ultimately create, you calculate a valuation, which is what you'd hire, say, a business broker, an investment banker to do for you. And most people think that it's all about revenues and profits, but EBITDA, you probably heard, earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, amortization, right? So there's 4 words that dictate a valuation for someone that's actually going to buy. Because remember, I could come in as a business broker or an investment banker and give you whatever price you want or valuation on your company. The question is, who's going to actually stroke the check? That's what matters. So it's sustainability and predictability of the profits. and then two other words, growth and risk, right? So the four words are sustainable, predictable, growth, risk. The more sustainable and predictable the future stream of revenues and profits, the better, the higher the valuation, right? The bigger the growth potential I'm able to see with ideally as little downside risk as possible, the better. So that again is going to get a higher valuation. An example of risk would be like concentration risk, right? Like what is concentration risk? If you've got a business that has too much revenue coming from one client, like there are companies out there that do multiple $million a year, and then they have one client that comprises 25, 50, maybe 75% of that revenue, right? What happens if that client goes away, right? Well, you could guess like that's a business that if, you know, the guy who's buying knows what they're doing, and a business broker will not tell you this, by the way, right? Like that's a business that you're just not going to stroke a check for. You may be crazy to, depending upon that relationship, but it's going to get a lower valuation all day long. Or another way of looking at it is what we call single points of failure, SPF. I presume that's pretty obvious, but if you've got, you know, multiple single points of failure or a really concerning multiple single point of failure, that's going to raise the risk. Therefore, I'm going to give you a lower valuation. So valuation is always a multiple of earnings, so to be clear, but the multiple will be dictated by those four words, right? So a business doing $1 to $2 million a year in gross revenue will likely sell for a multiple of less than 3 times earning. It could be 1, 2, 3, and of course any variation of that, you know, 2.3, 1.6, whatever. But you'll take it off EBITDA, multiply by the multiple, and then the multiple is dictated by those four words, right? Sustainable, predictable, growth, and risk. And importantly, Road Dog here, importantly, knowing the numbers is not enough, right? You need to know the activities that lead to the numbers. That's the magic. What's the difference between the guy that, you know, buys the company and makes $25 million off of $1 million investment, and the guy who buys the business for $1 million and it's his worst nightmare and ends up going bankrupt? It's the activities that lead to the numbers. Or the single reason why accountants aren't super rich. Look, here's 4 words for you. What different 4 words, and just think one, management. In fact, do it as arrows going down. One, management. Okay, now go down below management. And then you've got decision, because management make decisions. What do they make decisions on? The third word, and again, going down, activities, so it's management, below that decisions, below that activities, and then below that numbers, right? Well, what accountants do is they take the decisions that management made and the activities that the business undertook, which equaled numbers, and then the accountant gives you the numbers. The magic, and what the richest people in the world are able to do and do is they flip the numbers with the activities. Like I get the numbers and now I change the activities and then rejig the numbers, and did they go up and did they go down, and by what percentage and what amount, right? So it's like the ability to go activities, numbers, activities, numbers. That's where, you know, you change the activities and you change the numbers. This is where the magic is. And quite frankly, so this is the reason why accountants aren't rich. They play with numbers all day, but they don't have the ability to do that. The ones that do help you take your company public, help your business become significantly more profitable. And as I'm talking to you as a business coach, your ability to understand the numbers and the activities, this is the magic, you know, this is the secret sauce all day long, the magic pill, right? And like, where are the risks? Like, as you're doing that, the activities, like, where are the risks in these activities, right? Where are the single points of failure? Is there concentration risk? Where is the growth? Why haven't, if somebody's going to bring to me a business and they say, buy it for $1 million and you're going to make all this money, well, they're going to have some sort of growth strategies in their proposal, right? My question is, why haven't they undertaken those growth, those growth opportunities? Why haven't they done it? If it's such a great idea, why are they writing it down on a piece of paper? And why didn't they do it? So you could look at financial statements and valuations all you want, but what you got to be looking for is what drives the business. Is it the owner? Is it the sales team? Is it the joint venture relationship? Think Botox, studio that has a cosmetic surgeon and they send business to one another. Or think of a gym and a personal trainer. Well, if you're a personal trainer and you do all of your your training at a specific gym. Well, what happens if the gym decides to hire their own personal trainers or no longer allows you to come into their business and train everybody, right? Or more to the point, they jack up the prices or whatever that might look like. And by the way, a personal training business is probably not one you're going to sell. You'd have to own your own studio, but hopefully you get the idea there, right? So anyways, Road Dog, thinking about buying and selling a business, it's really you'd want to understand valuation, and then you'd want to understand where does that valuation, like where does that come from, right? So Road Dog, that's what I'd say, but I think that's a really good topic. I think that's one that business coaches should be understanding at a macro level at a minimum, potentially a micro level, but that's what I'd say, Shoots. What do you think?
So just a follow up for you, because obviously, like I'm stuck on this selling a business thing.
Yep.
Like, is it like it sounds like a stupid question. Like, is it a good idea to sell a business? But like, is it?
Yep.
Like,
No.
You know what I mean? Like,
Yep.
just to follow up on that.
No, okay. Look, first of all, it depends, right? But the mistake people make is they sell their business and then why I'm no longer passionate about what I'm doing, right? And it's like, that is not the reason to sell your business. I'll give you the red hot tip. I don't know many people that have been in business for 5 to 10 years that are still uber passionate about what it is that they're doing, right? And of course there are anomalies, but we play the percentages in business. We don't do the anomalies, right? So like as an example, like you sell a business, let's say the profits are 500 grand a year, right? And you sell it for 1.5 million, right? You take home, what are you going to take home? You're going to a little bit less than $1 million. Let's say you won't take home $1 million, but let's say you do. You take home $1 million, going to be lower than that. But again, just simple. Well, could you hire a guy? I just want to talk in straight lines, like in easy numbers, right? Like if you were making 500 grand of profit, could you hire a guy for 150 grand to be the CEO and take over the company, right? And then and what a lot of people do is they sell a business and guess what they want to do? They want to do what we do. They want to become a consultant, right? Well, how about you hire a guy and pay him 250 grand, which would be half of your profits, but you wouldn't need to pay that much, right? Like how complicated could this business be? Pay a guy 100, 150, maybe 200 grand to take over your business, continue to take home $300,000 of profit, consult the CEO, consult the business, while allowing him to grow the business and stay out of his way. And you could potentially be taking home 250, 350 grand a year for how long? Potentially forever. The business is run properly, like businesses last forever, right? And no guarantee by any stretch. You got to hire the right guy and you got to stay on you got to do what I said earlier. You got to go activities to numbers to activities. Like play that role, change your role. And by the way, the other side of that, okay, so you say, is it a good idea to sell your business? The other issue is $1 million is nowhere near enough to retire on, although it's a really good payday and people get really jacked up about it, overly jacked up, frankly, but it's not enough to retire on. So they take the $1 million and what do they got to do? They need to have earnings, which they were having, by the way, they just walked away from 500 grand a year, of earnings, approximately. So they put the money where? In the stock market. There's only 3 ways to make money: business, real estate, and stocks, right? So let's assume they don't have they were a business gal for a long time. How much experience they have in the stock market and real estate? When somebody takes $1 million and puts it into real estate or $1 million and puts it into the stock market, how does that work out a decent percentage of the time? I'll let you guys guess that. So all of a sudden, was that a good idea? And remember, sustainable, predictable growth risk is the conversation. So when you think about real estate and stocks, then put those words in there: sustainable, predictable growth and risk. Is it a good idea? And is $1 million enough to parlay into a really successful real estate investment scenario? I'll let you guys have a guess. And by the way, there will be anomalies and some people will crush it. That's great. Then high five to them. But, I don't know about that one. And by the way, the best business to buy is a guy, picture the guy is sick, dying, and just wants to enjoy the last few years of his life. He wants to get his affairs in order. That's the guy in a perfect world that you want to buy, or gal that you want to buy the business from, not somebody who's looking to finance their retirement. That's an important piece there to know, your audience, who you're talking to, who you're dealing with. And that's not to say you don't buy a business from somebody who's looking to finance or retire, but it's just that if you were to give me the option of who I'm buying from, it's real simple. And so how you could do that, like, think of creating a sale. There's 10 million businesses out there operating, owned by baby boomers. Have they taken the time to put it up for sale yet? Like, maybe if you come to them, knock on their door, you might be able to get, this is where you can really get your ripper deal. When the investment banker, the business broker gets involved, you could probably be assured, first of all, they're going to take 10% off the top. But that creating the deal, I always talk about the power. One word that has served me very, very well over the years is creation, right? Create products. Think about McDonald's. I use as the example. There's nothing you can buy at McDonald's that they didn't create, right? The Big Mac, the secret sauce, the chicken McNugget. And yes, that same stuff is available elsewhere, but Chicken McNugget is totally unique. Ronald McDonald, the Ronald McDonald House, the entire thing was created. So thinking about that, if you want to get a ripper deal, you create them. Like, I've bought lots of domain names over the years, so not so much anymore because I've got hundreds of them. That's not something I'm active with now, but I didn't go to, Cedo.com and like buy ones for sale. I went to people who had domain names, didn't know their worth, and just said, look, you'll have the money this afternoon. And I did really well there. So I created sales, if that makes sense. And by the way, when you're going to buy a business, okay, so I'm going to the other side here, Road Dog, but the two are just it's the heads and tails of the coin. You want to kind of, I've seen this, right? This dynamic where you're going in to buy somebody's business and you're kind of pounding your chest like a superstar, right? And take that all with a grain of salt, but that's the kind of frame, like, hey, you're asking too much, and do. You want to go in there. You want them to think that you're the son they never had, the daughter they never had. You want to be approaching it in that manner. You're about to take their baby off of them. You want to buy, again, the right business. You buy for $1 million. You could parlay that into 10, 20, $25 million of profit over, 5 to 10 years, and sell it for a whopping number and really be comfortable in your retirement. The opportunity is just an insane one, and one that I just don't think people are thinking about. So as a business coach, it's not about buying and selling businesses. It's understanding when someone comes to you and they say, Dave, should I buy or should I start a company? To not understand what we've just talked about over the last 10 or 15 minutes would be a grandiose mistake. Like, understanding that the danger zone is that first, getting from $1 to $2 million. And that those businesses are available from people that have, just no longer passionate about their company. And $1 million feels like significantly more, quite frankly, than what $1 million really is. That could be a huge opportunity for you. It could be a huge opportunity for your friends, your family, your sons, your daughter, your cousins, like to introduce them to that, right? Like, when I bought my house, Road Dog, right? Like, I sent a letter to the owner and I told them why we wanted to buy it. I talked about Sunday dinners and that, they would be invited to that Sunday dinner, and we had a young family, and that, like, this house was really going to be lived in. Pretty nice house. Like, they like the idea. This one of the reasons why they moved, by the way, is that they weren't living in the house, right? They were older. Their kids are growing up. The grandkids hadn't come yet, and that the house wasn't being lived in, right? Like, the pool wasn't being used. The whatever rooms were not being used. So anyway, so I sent that, and I got to tell you that, see, it's not, don't think for a second that the house sells to the highest price only every time. Like, absolutely not the case, especially in a dynamic where, the person selling the house doesn't exactly need the money, if that makes sense. Good example, bad example, not sure. What I'm saying is, when you go to buy that business, talk to them about how this business is going to live on and their legacy is going to be upheld, that you're going to name some products maybe after the old owner, that you're going to take a picture of his family and you're going to put it up behind the desk and it will be there forevermore. You're going to take a picture of them and put them on the website, and in a decade from today, they will still be, noted on there. That could be a way to take a business off somebody's hands that otherwise might not be letting it go. So anyways, Road Dog, selling a business, and so then okay, actually, Road Dog, Silicon Valley, right? And the, billion here and 25 million there. And, gosh, the numbers, totally different conversation and that sort of thing. But look, if you're a business coach, you're probably not knocking around in Silicon Valley. And these guys, they literally start their business to exit. Like they go for investment capital and they say, look, here's where we're going to exit. And that's just not what I'm talking about. It's a little bit of a different world that we're going over, but we're talking about the landscapers. We're talking about the roofing company. We're talking about the construction company, these types of guys. So that's a different conversation that I would handle differently. So I'm not going to do that today. And, but that's my answer about selling a business. It could be a really bad, like in closing, is selling a business a bad idea? Before you go and sell a business for $1 million, consider very seriously bringing somebody in, and bringing somebody in and have them run the company, and then you consult them, and it could actually go from being totally unpassionate about this to being a whole lot of fun now when you don't have to be the operator, because operators get tired. That's the problem. So the answer is it depends. Shoots. What do you think?
So it's simple. Okay, like I don't want to oversimplify this. Is it as simple as I'm just going to go and get a business broker? Like I'm going to sell it. Okay. Like, do I just go and get a business broker when my client or, whoever, let's say even my business, but if my client wants to sell, do I just do that? Yeah. Or is there more to it? Is there more perhaps that a coach could and should do?
Yeah. Great question. So a business broker, it's, in fact, this world pretty good, Road Dog, right? Like business broker is the wild, wild west, right? Like there's no regulation, no fiduciary responsibility. Like if you buy a car or a house, they have to disclose accidents or major issues. Like if a car had an accident, they'd have to tell you, there would be, black and white, here it is. And if a house had a fire, black and white, here it is, right? So that stuff has to be disclosed. That's not the case when selling a business. So not to mention that they don't have fiduciary responsibility to fact check. Like let's say that I provide financials and the information that I provide, on clients and they don't have to, they just assume that I'm right. They have no responsibility or there's nothing to say that they have to go and fact check all of that. So ideally, you want an investment banker. Depends on what kind of numbers. You'll see smaller deals will go for business brokers and larger deals will go through an investment banker, right? Like an investment banker is a business broker on steroids. Let's put it that way. They're regulated, have licenses to protect. And if you're doing bigger deals, you're probably not going to deal with the local business broker without an enormous amount of experience, right? But a business broker with an enormous amount of experience would normally become an investment banker. It's a bit of a 101. And also, like when you go to buy a business, they'll offer you, generally speaking, here's how it'll go down. They'll offer you income statements, and then you say, could I get a balance sheet? And they'll say something to the effect of, you don't need balance sheets, right? And then you say, humor me, because let me tell you, you absolutely need balance sheets for comparison purposes, and not just balance sheets, but you need multiple time periods so that you compare, right? Like an individual set of financials. We talked about this different times in the past, but an individual set of financials is useless. You need to see how the business is going over time, so you need comparables. Huge mistake that accountants, business owners make is that they get a tax return and call it financials, and that's ridiculous because they're not. But you do not only need financials, but you've got to look at different time periods. You can see how the business is going in the right direction. Like if I stood on a scale, Road Dog, right, and I'm 180 pounds, that might be awesome and that might be brutal. Well, what would dictate that? It would be how much did I weigh 3 months ago, 6 months ago, 12 months ago? And then in the future, how much do I weigh? So these are comparable. So if I project, so the future would be projections, and then the past are going to be comparable, so that I can see that I'm 180 pounds now, but I was 210 a year and a half ago. well, then I'm trending in the right direction, presumably. And by the way, where should I be, right? Like, age, size, etc. So also, and also a hack on steroids. But again, you're not going to get from, business broker. But if you might be thinking about buying a business, your client might be thinking about buying a business, but they don't have a huge amount of experience in the niche. But they know a ripper deal when they see one, right? Like a business that I outlined earlier that you could write $1 million check. The guy is, dying sick over it, just wants to ride out his last few years. And you're like, this is an opportunity. What do? Here's a hack. You go find the number 2 guy in the competition and then offer him to be the number 1 guy with your business. And that can work, provided you understand activities, numbers, and you are able to, you have a scoreboard of some description that you can watch and make sure the business is going in the right direction. As in, you're going to be a consultant to your new business. That can work pretty well. But also, I got to follow that up with, if your plan is to go buy a business and then make all this passive revenue without working it, please do yourself a favor. That's not going to go well. If you don't have if you haven't built multiple successful companies and had exits and really, understand all the stuff that we're talking about, that is not going to work for you, right? It's to manage expectations. If you're going to buy a business, if your client is going to buy a business, if your kids are going to buy a business, or somebody who is paying you, you are going to guide them on a business or an acquisition. To think that you're just going to hire it and then not have to work it is probably a pipe dream. And of course, somebody will tell me about the anomaly and how it worked amazing, but I don't deal with anomalies. I deal with percentages and plan to get to work. So there you go. It's, but yeah, business broker, an investment banker is a business broker on steroids, and that's really, they're regulated, and who you'd want to be going to for bigger deals and better advice sheets.
Okay, so obviously this is probably a little bit more advanced, right? Stuff that we've just talked about. I just want to bring it back to some of the basics here, because obviously there's probably going to be a lot of newer coaches listening to the podcast. And I love this question, because it kind of seems to change almost from time to time, which is pretty cool. But the basics are the fundamentals the same, but just how you answer it, I guess. So if I was looking at a client's financials, okay, and I'm trying to find my coach, right back to that question, what do I look for? So I'm trying to find, obviously I'm a new coach, I'm trying to get some clients in the door, and I need to find that client, like I need to find my coaching fees inside of that. So if I'm looking at their financials, where am I looking? What am I looking for?
Yep. Okay. And I agree. Good question. And by the way, we've both met business coaches with a lot of experience, years of experience, that, still, I don't know, confused by this, or I think it's not confused, but it's, just refusal to go down this track, right? Like they're not numbers people. They're not accountants. They don't want to be accountants. And then they use that as an excuse and a story to say not entering that world. But that would, my opinion, that would be a mistake. And by the way, I used to be that guy, by the way. And then I delved straight into financials and accounting, and I love it. Anyways, and the reason I love it, not that I love it by any stretch, wrote a book, Accounting 101 for Business Coaches, but co-wrote it, by the way. But yeah, I'm not, to say that I'm in love with it, I'm in love with it because of the impact that it can have very, very quickly. So, like, let's say the basics, accounts receivable, I open up, there's an accountant listening, and I open them up, and I say, you got a client who is in trouble, but not a business that hasn't got going yet, but a business, let's just say they're doing $1 million gross. Where would you look? Without hesitation, I would dare say that they would all say accounts receivable. Okay, when you have an accounts receivable problem, you are basically, you are doing the work, you're paying your staff, you're paying commissions, you're showing up, you're doing the work, and then you're not receiving your money, right? Like, so that would be a mistake, and that's just really simple. It lives on your balance sheet. So you want to be able to, look at accounts receivable, and if they've got a hole in their boat versus turning on, creating funnels and turning on Facebook ads and learning how to use TikTok and Lord knows whatever else, You go and do nothing but solve the accounts receivable problem. Now, to solve it, what you've got to do is you've got to break the accounts, because it's the accounts receivable will live like as a number. Let's just use $150,000. That's an example of accounts receivable. Well, I need to know who owes, like 150 does nothing for me. I want to know exactly what companies, I want to know exactly how much they owe. And then I also want to know exactly how old it is. Is it 30, 60, 90 days, 120 days old or beyond? Stuff that is 120 days old and beyond, even 90 days old and beyond, we got to get to immediately. And there's a really good chance that you are not receiving that money at all, which you got to do. That's a bad debt. You got to write it off. You can take it to the other side of your balance sheet. So basically, because you're not paying tax, because you will pay. Here's what happens. Businesses have that what did I say, $150,000 of accounts receivable. They're not receiving the money, and then they're actually paying tax on that amount, right? Like stupidity at its highest level. Bottom line, accounts receivable, it's not just about looking at a whole number. You've really got to break it down. And then, of course, the business owner a lot of the time is too arrogant or egotistical, whatever it is, or too busy with whatever to go and, basically get on the phone and receive, whatever, get a hold of their accounts receivable. And that, I would say, depending upon the business, but we said $1 million company, which is not a big one by any stretch. The business owner needs to stop whatever he was doing, get in the office, pick up the phone, and work out who is and is not going to pay, and get that into the bank account immediately. And then that solves that. That doesn't really solve the problem, but that's going to alleviate the accounts receivable problem, right? Like take it from 150 down to 90, 80, whatever. But now in the future, how are they going to stop that from happening? Right? Like you got to make sure that you don't have this massive accounts receivable issue in the future. Also inventory. So cost of goods sold turns into inventory, basically the same thing. Inventory, where's that at? Often a huge issue. Some smaller companies, some bigger companies, but when inventory is not managed properly, it's just, you might as well take money and literally light it on fire. Another one that's misunderstood is accounts payable. I call this sweetheart syndrome, which we've covered at different times, Road Dog, on the podcast. But sweetheart syndrome is the guy who's got an accounts receivable problem, in other words, not collecting their money. And then accounts payable, they want to pay everybody because they hate debt. They don't like owing anybody any money. Okay, well, go into common sense corner for me for a second, and then tell me what that's going to do to your cash flow. It's going to crush it. So at the end of the month, they're like, where's all my money? Where's all my money? Where's all my money? Well, I can tell you that there's a really good chance that the money is that you're not collecting the damn money in accounts receivable, although there's receivables coming in, right? You just don't realize that if you're owed 100 and you only get 75, you get a $25,000, like you got $25,000 there you need to go and collect, right? So sweetheart syndrome is accounts receivable and accounts payable, which is common without question. And then inventory, again, understanding that. But the income statement is really, so basically the income statement is really what you want to be able to read. Really, income statement, I promise you, it's the simplest thing in the world. If you could use a calculator, you could understand an income statement. It's just got your revenues at the top, your expenses at the bottom, and then it balances it out. It's just more, a little more to it than that. But basically, it's that simple. And this is where you can really get in and so go straight to expenses. And then what you got to do is you got to just look for, where are they spending money? Look at expense, really think of stuff. Don't use the word expense, use the word investment in the future. That will change your mindset and then your coaching clients' mindsets and investment. And then what do you want to invest in? And I can tell you that two things, getting clients, keeping clients. If it doesn't do one of those two things, you should think long and hard about whether or not you need that expense any longer. And that's it. And you just got to go, but it's very boring. You got to manage your client state because, going through financial statements or going through the expenses of the company has got to be one of the boring, tedious, brutal things ever, but it can also be insanely profitable, right? So here it is. If you have a client who has 20% margins and you make them $1, okay, how much should they keep? The answer is 20 cents. But when you go to their expenses and you save them $1, how much do they keep? And the answer is 100 cents. So if you charge, let's say $2,000 a month, 24 grand a year, $4,000 a month, 40 grand, 48 grand a year, whatever the number is, if you wanted to find the 12, 24, 36, 48 grand, 60 grand a year that you're charging, where's the place to start? And rather than drive traffic and make 20 cents, why not go to their expenses, be very boring, but make 100 cents? But make sure that you bring it to their attention that here's what we accomplished. So a conversation that I would have with my client, ridiculous predictability, is I would say, congratulations. They go, what? I go, I have covered my fees for the entire 12 months. So I am now free. We're 3 months into this and I am free for the next 9 months for you. High five. After you have that conversation, you position it properly and you get better at it. You're never going to lose a coaching client before 12 months because they just see it totally differently. The mistake is that you save them all this money, you make them all this money, but you forget to explain to them, what it looks like with their bottom line, and they should be high-fiving you. So anyway, so income statement is kind of like the Mac Daddy and very, very straightforward. 3 things that you do with an income statement. You do it financials, but I want you to think about the income statement, which is the important one. Write these 3 words down if you're able, or commit them to memory. Comparables, trends, relationships. Absolutely critical. Comparables, I mentioned that earlier. You do not want one financial statement. You need 3, let's say, so that you can see that you can see how it's going. Is it going up? Is it going down? Is it staying stagnant? Trends. When you go left to right, think of your financial statements laid out, 3 years, 3 quarters, 3 months, whichever you're doing. You're going to see trends. Are expenses going up? Are expenses going down? Are sales going up? Are sales going down? So going left to right, you're going to see trends. And then going up and down, you're going to see relationships. Okay. So let's say that you have a restaurant and then your rent is X. Let's say your rent is 100 grand. And then your revenues were 500 grand, right? Well, what is that relationship? The $100,000 is 20% of your gross revenues of 500 grand, right? But is that a good relationship? Is that a bad relationship? Is that down from last year, up from last year? Did they raise the rent, or did you increase sales without having that increase, without, creating a bigger restaurant? But bottom line, relationships up and down, right? Like your expenses compared to your revenues, what's the relationship? That's how you come up with, I said, 20% margins. Well, you get that by going up and down an income statement where your relationship between those 2 numbers. Very simple. It might, to somebody who's not really familiar with financials and whatnot, it can sound a little bit complicated, but I promise you, comparables, trends, relationships, you want to be thinking about those 3 words when you're looking at all these things. And it's not overly complicated. And just 3 documents you need to understand, and that is just balance sheet, cash flow statement, and an income statement. And there's different, income statement can be used. They just want to confuse the hell out of you, right? Just understand that accounting was designed to confuse you. And why? Because the government wants all your money. And I think, again, when you think about that, as you're looking at all this, you understand that, look, they're just doing this to confuse me. Really dummy it all down, and it's super simple. I wrote down something else I want everybody to understand, that percentages, and again, we've covered this on different episodes, but I'd cover it many times more in the future because it's a superpower. Teaching yourself, put your mask on yourself, and then teaching your clients to think in percentages is a superpower to wealth. Okay, so example, you got 20% margins, and then we increase them to 30%. The untrained eye goes 20 to 30, that's 10%. Well, if you made $100,000 last year, that's $10,000. It's okay. It's not exciting, but it's 10. But that's not it. 20 to 30 is what? 20 to 30 is a 50% increase, because 20 to 22 is 10. 20 to 24 is 20. 20 to 26 is 30, right? So teaching yourself to think in percentages, right? Like if you have 2% conversion on your landing page, you increase that to 3%. So 2% conversion to 3%. You think 1%, who would bother, who would care, who would spend money, time, and effort on that? 2 to 3, that's a 50% increase, not 1, right? So the power of that is insane. And then profit is a theory. It's just something else that I want everybody to understand. It's like earlier, the business broker has no fiduciary responsibility to really look at these financials and ascertain whether or not they're, true, correct, accurate, etc. So profit most people think profit, oh, my business profited XYZ. what do they say? Cash is fact. Profit is a theory. An example of that, and we won't go down that rabbit hole today, but like your accounts receivable will make you look like you have a profitable business. What did I say earlier? You know, you got whatever number, you got $100,000 owed in accounts receivable, but 40 of that is never going to be realized because you haven't had your eye on the prize. Your client has their eye on the prize. Okay, well, that $40,000 looks like profit, but what is it? It's a nothing, but it's about to get moved to the other side of your balance sheet called a bad debt, and it's game over, Red Rover, right? So profit, understanding that profit is a theory, cash is fact, right? Like that's it's a really important, like in the internet marketing world, how many guys do these $1 million launches? Okay, the question is, if you knew these guys, Road Dogg and I know them, I'll tell you that the $1 million launches are a lot less exciting when they net their money, like when they go count their cash in their bank account afterwards. So just profit. I just want you to, profit is a theory. As you're delving into financials and understanding financial statements, etc., understanding that concept will help you guide your clients at a higher level. So there you go, Road Dogg. That's what if I'm looking to find my clients, I think accounts receivables where I'm going, inventory, accounts payable. I'm not in any way saying don't pay your clients. Not what your debtors, whatever. You're not paying your distributors. That's not what I'm saying at all. I'm just saying that, like, if you buy something from Apple, they don't pay you for 90 days. Okay. There's a reason why they don't pay you for 90 days, because that's just, the money's better in their bank account than yours. But anyway, so that's accounts receivable is a big one. Inventory, going to the expenses on the income statements, going to their credit card statements. By the way, I didn't even say that. Like, that could be the real easy way of doing it. And you don't have to X something. You just teach them to negotiate, right? Like, if their rent is X, go ask the landlord, right? It can't hurt. It doesn't mean you have to ruin the relationship. Just the word negotiation is a bloody powerful one. So that's what I'd say, Shoots. What do you think?
Well, it's funny, even with the rent stuff, like even right now, right? Like tail end, if you will, of COVID and everything else, there's a lot of businesses still going to go under. And what an opportunity to renegotiate. Because I'm sure there's a lot of landlords that'd be like, yes, like, let's lock you in for another 5 years, right? And they'd probably be more than willing to give a bit of a discount. That's just my thinking. So
Yep.
Close us out. I guess that is it. Hey, the one thing would be like, just, know the 3 documents that you need to understand. Would you say that's the one thing that people can take from today's episode and start putting in their coaching practice?
Yeah, for sure. That's always a good one, right? But I just think buying, I think we talked a lot about buying and selling. I'm glad that, again, did a follow on from last week. Just again, macro level, when somebody comes to you and says, should I start a business or buy a business? To not understand what we just talked about would be a mistake, right? Most people just think, oh no, why would you buy a business when you can just start one? Well, I just explained why, right? So understanding that stuff at a macro level, the same way we talked about NFTs, we talked about crypto. You don't have to be an expert, but to not understand that stuff at a macro level, in my opinion, would be an error. Because you got to be able to guide your clients in the, you know what I mean? I don't know. I'm a big believer in that. My dad taught me when I was young approximates. Like, I remember, like, math. He wasn't like, you don't need to know exact answers in math. You need to know approximates, right? So I think in business, understanding things at a macro level, it's been very good for me, and I think it'd be very good for the others as a business coach. And then you can speak to an expert intelligently, and then you can bring in an expert and then work out, are they actually an expert? Maybe that's a way of looking at it. So yeah, buying and selling a business, so Shoots, understanding the power of that, I think got massive.
Beauty. All right. Well, thanks for tuning in to another episode of Business Coaching Secrets with the man on top of the hill, King Karl. And if you're not on the inside and getting asked to the pre-show, or you aren't getting Karl's daily emails, or just want more information on how to build your coaching company, visit focused.com and subscribe today. Again, if you enjoyed the podcast, please share the fellow coach or someone that you think might make a great coach. And of course, as always, we'd appreciate it if you'd rate this episode, as we know that the streaming services give an insane amount of weight towards reviews. So please leave us a review if you like what you heard. And that, I cannot believe it, is it for yet another week. We will see you in the next episode, folks. Remember, progress equals happiness. Take care, everybody.
Karl Bryan built Profit Acceleration Software 2.0 to train business coaches how to find any small business owner more than $100,000 in 45 minutes without them spending an extra dollar on marketing or advertising. This becomes a business coach's superpower. So as a business coach, you'll never again have to worry about working with business owners that can't afford your high-end coaching fees. Check us out at Focused.com.